morning. This lecture video is going to explain to you everything you need to know about the mole, or this really important chemistry unit. So what is a mole? Well, a mole is just a name for a specific number of things. So for instance, we use the word a dozen to describe 12 things. Here is a dozen eggs. Well, a mole is just like a dozen, except instead of 12 things, it's actually 602 hexillion things. So it's a really, really big number that we use for chemistry because atoms are super, super small. So in order to figure out how many atoms there are, we're going to have huge numbers in order to get them. So a mole is just like a dozen, meaning that it's a name for a specific number. But instead of being 12 things like a dozen, it's actually 602 hexillion things. So if I have a dozen donuts, I have 12 donuts. If I have a mole of donuts, I have 602 hexillion donuts, which would give someone a serious stomach ache. So really, a mole is a lot of something. A dozen eggs is 12 eggs. A mole of eggs, 602 hexillion. We use Avogadro's number to abbreviate 602 hexillion. So this is named after the Italian scientist that discovered the number. But basically, remember, scientific notation is an abbreviation of a number. So we take 602 hexillion and we put it into scientific notation, which is 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd. And that is called Avogadro's number. And that is how many moles there are of something, how many things in a mole. So if a mole of any single element is going to have Avogadro's number of atoms in it, so 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd atoms in it. So if I have a mole of hydrogen, that means I have 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd atoms in that mole of hydrogen. If I have a mole of carbon, it also has 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd atoms, because that's what a mole is. Now, if I have a mole of nitrogen, 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd atoms in that mole of nitrogen. However, you have to remember that hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, they all have different weights or masses to them. So the mass of a mole of an element is going to be different because each element has a different mass. So if hydrogen weighs less than carbon, then a mole of carbon is going to have the same number of atoms as a mole of hydrogen, but a mole of carbon is going to weigh more or have more mass because carbon has more mass than hydrogen does. So that's the short version of what a mole is. A mole is just a name for a specific number of things. We're going to be using Avogadro's number a lot lately. In the next lecture videos, we'll talk about how we can convert the number of moles or find out the number of moles in a particular element or a compound based on how many grams it might have in it, or vice versa. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask.